Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Holden.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Cassandra. That was brilliant. It was so beautifully put and absolutely bang on the money. So I absolutely applaud that. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And hello from Vancouver, Canada. I am here to talk about fear, intuition, and the power of connection. So it's 3 or 4 in the morning. You've been awake all night, tossing and turning. You've gone over that checklist over and over and over in your head about, if I looked at all the options here for this business I'm about to launch, or this concept I'm trying to get off the ground. I've looked at my business plan over and over, the marketing strategy, if I raised enough money, have I hired enough people? And there's this gnawing, grating feeling in my gut and in my throat, and I can't determine whether or not it's fear or intuition telling me this is a good idea or a bad idea. And for me, my earliest recollection of intuition came at the age of 5. It was 1963, so you can do the math on that. And I was living in Winnipeg with my family. Winnipeg, Manitoba is a city smack dab in the middle of the Canadian prairies. And it's full of the most incredibly friendly people, massive mosquitoes in the summer, and really freezing cold days in the winter. And it was spring of 63, and my older brother and I, were down at the end of the street playing on this dirt pile. And there were about 10 of us, I guess, hanging out. And I looked over, and there was this boy on this red CCM bicycle. And I didn't own a bike, my brother didn't own a bike. But I really coveted this bike. I thought, oh my gosh, this is just magnificent. And at that moment, I looked down and I saw in the dirt 25 cents, a quarter. And I couldn't believe my eyes. So I reached down and grabbed it and picked it up, and sure enough, it was 25 cents. And I proclaimed this to the group that I just found a quarter. And upon looking up, the boy on the bike was standing right in front of me, and he said, "Can I see it?" And I said, sure you can see it, no problem. And he said, well, I actually have to get on my bike to look at it. And I had this funny pang, this funny feeling in my gut, and I thought, yeah, okay, sure, here. And I handed it to him, and he rode off. I never saw him or the quarter again. And I was a bit devastated, to put it mildly. And as I made my way home that day, I was trying to recover from this trauma. To put things into perspective, my weekly allowance was 5 cents. And minimum wage in Manitoba in 63 was around $1 an hour. So this was a real windfall for me. But it was a treasure found and then lost, all within 60 seconds. And so walking back home, I thought to myself, okay, what can I do to earn that money back, to take the sting out of what's just happened? And I determined that delivering newspapers would be a great solution. All I needed was, inventory, and I needed a means to transport that inventory and distribute it. So I approached a friend and I said, here's my plan. And if you help me with this and loan me your wagon, I'll split the profits with you. So he was in, very enthusiastic. So we went around, started knocking on doors, and one after another went up to people's houses and asked them if they had a newspaper that they might be finished with that they could give me. And I did get some funny looks, I must admit, but we made our way around the block, and before long, I had a stack about 18 inches high of newspapers, all tightly folded and neatly, very presentable. We run around the corner, I put on my salesman's hat, or perhaps my salesman's face, and I knocked on the same doors, and I asked those same people if they wanted to buy a newspaper. Now, you can just imagine their disbelief, but that day I earned 68 cents, almost triple what I had found and then subsequently lost. And so off we went to the local corner store, filled our pockets with candy, which was the motivator for my friend and for me too, I must be honest. And I remember going home that night feeling incredibly proud of myself that I had earned this money, and more importantly, that I felt quite liberated, that there was an option for me. And I think it was probably part of, it was already in my DNA to a certain extent, but this really set me on a course as an entrepreneur and how I would think and approach things. But I never forgot that feeling that I had when that boy said, I need to get on my bike to look at it. And so that formed kind of one of the cornerstones of my life and a pillar and a real calibration point for me that I've called upon repeatedly. So some years later, I was about 15, and I was quite adventuresome and quite outdoorsy. I decided that I would test my mettle, and I thought a cool thing to do would be to go and camp overnight on Victoria Glacier. Now, Victoria Glacier is just above Lake Louise, Alberta, in the Canadian Rockies, and it's absolutely magnificent. It's breathtaking, it's spiritual. And for any of you that have been there and been fortunate enough to see it, it's just the water's the most beautiful color. So on a given Friday night, I found myself preparing for my trek up to the Rockies, and when all my friends were at parties having fun and getting carried away and chasing girls, and as one does, and one did rather, not does, I packed up, woke up the next morning at 7 o'clock, made my way down to the highway and hitchhiked up to Lake Louise. And I hiked around the lake and up past what's called the tea house and up onto the glacier, where I arrived around 4 in the afternoon at an elevation of about 8,500 to 9,000 feet. It was cold and it was high. And this is me. I had taken my first selfie. I had a little Kodak Instamatic 124 camera, and I looked at it just to see that there wasn't any frost or snow on it. It's very cold, and I could see myself in the little lens. So I thought, well, let me try this. Boom. Well, that was 1973. I didn't know what a selfie was. I didn't realize it'd be such a trendsetter and the entire globe would follow me in this. Anyway, just kidding. It was completely innocent and by accident. So I pitched my tent and I made myself some dinner, and before long the sun set, as it does in this area. You're literally completely surrounded by mountain peaks. And when it got dark, I had nothing else to do, so I went to bed. And in the middle of the night, I was awakened by footsteps outside my tent in the snow, crunching along. And I froze. I froze completely. For what seemed to be an eternity. And my heart was pounding so hard, I swore it was going to break through my chest cavity. And I had never, up to that point in time in my life, ever experienced that kind of primal fear. So as I lay there trying to process this, I thought, okay, what are my options here? Well, what I do know is that I'm 2.5 hours hike to civilization, which is the Chateau Lake Louise, which is at the other end of the lake. Okay, noted. So if I have an altercation with said animal, it might be dodgy as to whether or not I'm going to make it back. So option one was wait till I don't hear any footsteps, quietly unzip the zipper of the tent, peek out, and if the animal's far enough away, make a run for it and just bolt and run and get off the glacier and into the trees. And okay, so that was noted. Number two was I can slip out of my sleeping bag, put on my hiking boots, grab the hatchet that was beside me, unzip the sleeping bag, and I might add that even the thought of rustling my sleeping bag in a moment like this scared me to death. Because I'm pretty sure that animal knew there was something or somebody in that tent, but thankfully there was no food. I put that about 100 meters away up the glacier. So door number two was to do that and then go out and perhaps take advantage of first mover status and attack, or at least scare the animal off. Okay, noted. Or number 3 was just stay still, Mark. And my instinct did tell me that was the right choice, and I do think it was the right thing to do, and that's what I did. And I laid there for the rest of the night, my eyes the size of pie plates, I swear. And I got up the next morning, and sure enough, the paw prints were 4.5 inches in diameter. It was a mountain lion of some sort, and it was a large animal. And this became kind of the second pillar for me, the pillar of fear, which I have called on repeatedly as well, and referred to as another calibration point. And although not everything that I have done has scared me to that extent, that at that primal level, it was one of those seminal moments in my life. So I'm not trying to actually put fear against intuition. I believe they're both massively powerful, and we should embrace fear, and we should try and listen to our intuition. But I think that fear tends to live here in our heads, and intuition lives here in our guts. 6 weeks ago or so, I was given a fairly serious health diagnosis that really shook me for a loop. And 2 or 3 nights into this, I'll call it the shock and awe phase of this diagnosis, I had been tossing and turning all night and going through the what ifs and the why me's and the what nows and how do's and so on. Maybe a few other adjectives that I won't say on camera. And I got up that morning and I walked out onto our deck, and we have this round patio table. And there's a hole in the middle to facilitate an umbrella. And the umbrella that we have, the circumference of that is slightly narrower than the opening. So it tended to rattle around when we first bought it. So I thought, okay, clever chap. I'll take a wine cork. I'll take a little slice out of it. And I'll wedge it in there, and that'll do the trick. And it did. And so every fall, I take the umbrella out, take the cork, put it under the table. Every spring, repeat the process. And I've done this for the last 6 or 7 years. Well, on this given day, I walked out and feeling completely beat up, vulnerable, a little freaked out. I don't know. There was something going on. And I looked and the cork was gone. Come on. Actually, I wanted to say, is that the best you can do? No. And I look over to my left, and there's a crow sitting on the railing. And I look at it, and he's looking right at me, making crow sounds. And my natural propensity was to go and shoo it away. But on this given day, I looked at the crow and I said, "Where's my cork? What happened to my cork? Bring it back." And of course, the crow flew away, and that was the end of it. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, I must be honest, whenever I'd go outside, we live on the second floor of an apartment building. Whenever I'd go outside walking along the street, I kept thinking to myself, if I'm that crow and I've just taken that from that table, I realize I can't eat it. I can't really make a nest with it. I'm just going to drop it. So I'd look around, and it was all to no avail. So I just left it, and it kind of left my mind. Well, 10 days later, I walked out onto the deck after another quasi-sleepless night, and I looked down, and not 5 feet from where the cork had gone missing was this, the cork. And the crow had connected with me and brought it back. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds absolutely crazy. And I don't know exactly what to make of that, other than this connection that we must have had. But what I've come to know is this, that we are all connected. And never before in the history of humanity have we been more bombarded on a daily basis with all order of media, text messages, tweets, videos, whatever it is. It's crazy. I don't think we were made out to deal with this. And as this noise floor, I'll call it, continues to rise in all of us as a result of this, it gets more and more difficult to access that intuitive place that exists within us all. But doing so has never been more important. And if you can connect with that place here, it will open up an entire universe of possibilities. So there's this song that I love, the lyric from this song by Don Henley, New York Minute. It's such a great song. And in it, the line is, "What the head makes cloudy, the heart makes very clear." And I'd like to rephrase that. And I'd like to say, what the head makes cloudy, the gut makes clear. Thank you.